Hello, welcome, and thanks for joining us today for the next webinar in our Energy Network series. It's great to see so many people signing up and joining us as well. We pride ourselves on the fact that we manage mission-critical IT and operational technology for highly regulated organizations like yourselves across the UK. In today's webinar, my colleague, Michael Crabtree, will discuss cybersecurity and its place across your energy sites. Now, this is an area that's been receiving more attention recently, and it's important to understand the basics as well as the extent of your requirements before rushing into it. Don't feel like you need to make notes or take it all in straight away, as we'll be sending out a recording of this webinar later today. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A box at the side at any time. There's going to be dedicated time for questions towards the end of the webinar. Now, we've got a lot to get through today, so I'll just hand over to Mick now.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. We're into February, so 2025, which has been 3 months since our last webinar. So yes, welcome. So we're going to be looking at cybersecurity, as Craig said, and obviously there's quite a lot to cover in 30 minutes. So it will be a little bit of a skim across the surface, so to speak, delving into things that hopefully are applicable to you guys and you'll find useful. So we're going to be looking at a little bit of an introduction, a little bit about what cybersecurity is, a little bit of how that works in traditional IT and things like that, and what our customers are asking us in terms of how can they apply that to their CNI and to their SCADA systems. As we said already, IT and OT, there are actually some differences, and you guys might be finding that as you're trying to wade through all the different kind of compliance and methodologies that you need to look at applying to your systems. And we're going to be looking at those and some of the different types of compliance that you can look to apply. And then finally, we're going to have a little look about how we can help you guys out with tackling some of those complexities that are inherent in cybersecurity. So yeah, as Craig has said, you know, we look and manage critical IT systems and OT systems as well in highly regulated areas like yours. So let's have a little look at cybersecurity. So really, the idea of security of an IT or a computer system has been around for a long time. And over the years, the need for technology, hardware, software, and of course training is obvious for IT systems. You know, people know about hardware like firewalls, switches, computers, and things like that. Software such as antivirus, anti-malware, and newer kind of products like endpoint protection that go on things like phones and laptops and all that good stuff. And of course, the procedures that go alongside all these, such as firmware updates, virus protection updates, backups, those types of things. And then finally, training and giving knowledge to users. It's actually a relatively new thing, bizarrely enough. You know, IT departments would assume that users needed to be controlled with as many tools as possible. And with enough tools, we can stop people having problems and having cybersecurity issues, can't we? Well, obviously, that's not strictly true, is it? So training and knowledge to these people, you know, most people are quite intelligent and clever folks, and we can teach them how to see these problems and identify them potentially and stop them, help as part of our kind of collateral of tools to mitigate any risks against cyber issues. So what is it? It's about protecting basically these types of things. Anyone who's worked in cybersecurity will have been introduced to the CIA triad at some point in time, and it really underpins all of the cybersecurity efforts that we work to in terms of confidentiality. So with that, it's obviously permitted authorized access to information, but you've got to protect it from proper disclosure, really. So that can be via encryption, passwords, and also measuring that importance of that information and its sensitivity, and also not necessarily for you guys, but certainly protecting PII or personal identifiable information is something that's key in IT systems. We've got integrity, so that's the measurement to what something is whole or it's complete, and that it basically, if you're passing data from one place to another, is it consistent? is it correct when it gets to its destination? Or if you're storing that information or data, when it's placed there, when you come back to it, is it still the same as when you left it? And then finally, availability. So that's the concept that data is accessible to users when and where you need it, and in the form and format that you need it. Doesn't mean that it's there all the time. It just means that the systems and the data meet the requirements of the organization for the timely and reliable access. So you've got to assess your criticality. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? So, but what does it mean for when you're monitoring and running your own power plant, solar farm, battery site, etc.? Traditional systems really have migrated from vendor proprietary closed systems. Any of you who've been around a while might have seen something like the big cabinets of stuff and information, or seen the big panels with the big mimic on there. And obviously, again, terminology's changed about these systems, aren't they? We all know of SCADA and what that is, but then ICS systems, so industrial control systems, IACS, as it's now probably normally called, so an integrated administration and control system, and then quite a lot of the time bundled under OT now, or operational technology. So we'll be using some of those terms throughout the webinar. I'm sure most of you have come across a lot of those before, but it was just for the odd people who may not have, which is just a quick kind of look at that. But yeah, and the early systems that were around started to become and converge onto IT type networks, or TCP IP networks, often using off-the-shelf or commercially off-the-shelf equipment, firewalls, switches, Ethernet based PLCs and those types of things, and of course HMIs that are now PC based systems in the main. And instead of having the mimics being these huge things on walls and on panels and things like that, starting to put them and basically have them be controlled and viewable and monitored via PC based HDMIs. So what happened really that's highlighted that maybe IT cyber methods might not be effective for CNI? Well, let's have a little look at some incidents. There's quite a few on this slide here that have been around since the ones we've got noted here from 2010. And as you can see from the list, I won't go through every kind of target, but there's a lot of CNI in terms of power station type attacks, those types of things, or things that kind of link into it, and supply chain type attacks as well. It's looking at the methods. That's what we need to look at. So something like Stuxnet targets HMIs, Windows PC based ones, then specifically looks for Siemens software taking control of PLCs, basically damaging that equipment and in an attempt to render it useless. There's others such as Havnex, should I say, specifically designed to search for industrial devices using OPC, a protocol that's used for communication of a lot of equipment that you've got. And basically it takes advantage of the fact of the fact that IT systems were starting to get connected to OT systems for ease of use and connectivity, and they could jump between one and the other, or jumping from supply chain IT systems, so maybe from your partners and your suppliers into those OT networks. Crash override creates a backdoor into a system specifically targeting IEC 101, 104, 81850 protocols. Again, all the protocols that your systems use to control and monitor what you're doing. And then when it's done, it wipes the system. So it wipes your HMI, making it absolutely useless. So yeah, as we can see, the big thing and takeaway from this is that these are specifically designed to attack your systems, to attack that live physical equipment that you've got on site. So yeah, a lot different to maybe previous where, where things like, yes, there's ransomware and things like that, but these are specifically targeting these systems. They're not designed to attack IT systems. So a lot of our clients have been asking us, how can we be sure we're going to be safe? As asset owners, you've got top line responsibility for this. So sometimes they've come to us and say, look, we need the help and we need some assurance from people like us. So looking at some of the standards. these are some of the standards that are currently used in IT, so why not use them? So we've come across a lot of specifications asking for ISO 27001. So that's one of the biggest information security kind of standards that are used across IT, maybe helped along with ISO 9001, which is a quality standard, using things like ITIL for those people that know and use that. But then some of the governmental / regional kind of guidance, such as NIST in the US, NIST in the EU, and then for us in the UK, using the NCSC and their CAF, the Cyber Assurance Framework, and then some of their what I would call more kind of for beginners, but kind of minimum standard kind of things such as Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. In terms of the CAF, it's the most aligned to NIST in terms of what it looks like and does based on outcomes. So when we do our assessments, it's what are the outcomes of the methodologies and the controls that are put in place, but it doesn't focus on the controls like some do, and doesn't focus on those remediations and additional compensating kind of countermeasures that are have to be put in place. We'll talk a bit more about that coming up. And it's certainly unique in the fact that it can be used in the UK for CNI, and it can be used for both IT and OT systems. It's one of the few can actually do that, and we'll talk about why. So yeah, in the ISA committee, it considered standards such as 27001. It did, but it found that we're inefficient in terms of controlling the safety, integrity, reliability, and of course the security of your systems. So yeah, what is the difference? What's the difference between an IT and OT system? Consequences. That's probably the biggest one. Compromised IT systems may have financial consequences, maybe loss or exposure of data, and usually that exposure of data is just the byproduct of trying to trying to get money out of a business, isn't it? As we all know from a lot of things that turn up in the news. An OT compromise, well, that can be loss of health and life, can't it? Damage to the environment, loss of product, so you're unable to make power for a certain amount of time, which of course then can go against you in terms of your legal and regulatory requirements, and your ability to provide power in the grid, of course. So we've talked about that in physical security too, haven't we? So if anyone watched the last webinar, we talk about some of that stuff in that one. Again, loss of your own proprietary and maybe confidential information, financial losses as well on your side, and an impact on your local, regional, even national security. So yeah. And at the end of the day, you know, OT, it detects, causes physical changes on physical systems, and therefore it's really important. So yeah, I mean, some of those are obviously across IT systems as well, but more than half of those are unique to CNI. So that's when the ISA was saying, well, actually, yeah, there are some key differences in terms of characteristics. Yeah, we tend to have more predictable failure modes with OT, so we can predict more about the outcomes of what would happen based on failures and problems with systems. You've got much tighter time criticality and deterministic kind of and things that you need to achieve. You know, in terms of, you know, things like your intertrips, for example, you know, they're milliseconds of time criticality that you need to make sure are correct. And therefore, if there's any problems with that, then that can mean a shutdown of system, as you guys are probably more than aware. High availability requirements, got to be up 24/7, hasn't it? All the time. And as much as we can say that in IT, actually, it means much more here, doesn't it? Much more rigorous management of change, which usually will mean that you've got to have actual outages and periods of outages, maintenance windows lasting numerous days or even a week or more. So you've got much more controlled change management because the consequences are greater. You also have significantly longer component lifetime expectations. You know, everyone knows of an IT system. You get a laptop every 2 to 3 years. You know, you'll have to look at potentially refreshing an IT system every 5 years, whatever that lifetime expectation will be of an IT system. We're asking to design systems that have a designated lifetime of 20, 25, 30 years. Obviously, some of the hardware that's IT based, we would have to be refreshed out in between there potentially, but the actual components are expected to last those types of lifetimes. And then going back to that CIA triad, the one thing that's missing, safety. We don't consider safety when it comes to IT security, whereas it's a huge consideration of OT security. So we've got safety, integrity, availability, and confidentiality, known as SIAC. So we adhere to that instead. Looking at the reasons of the five main attacks that we saw on the previous slides, how many of those could be traced back to countries, so state-sponsored actors basically, looking to spy or perform espionage on their enemies? So political agendas are huge in OT. Yes, there's potential environmental concerns and environmental kind of reasons potentially. Revenge, insider threats, there can be an amount of those as well. And yes, of course, there's going to be those people that want to try and exploit financial reasons, but usually harm, that's the objective of attacking an OT system, not profit. So yeah, and for us, protecting our own sovereignty in terms of the UK and our energy dependency, that's a massive goal for us. So as we move into that compliance side, it can get quite complex. There's lots of them, and we've got a few here. 27,001, as we said, is the most applicable for IT infrastructures. So we've got a little graphic there on the right that shows that. And then when it comes to OT environments, we tend to use more of the IEC 62443. And that's something that's really come along in probably the last year. It's something that's been around longer than that, but it's certainly something that's starting to come up in more of the requirements that we're seeing. So yeah, and as we said, the NCSE's CAF can kind of go over both of those if we need it to, which is good. Obviously, there's lots of others as well. NIS 2, which obviously a new directive in Europe, before that NIS. In the UK, we still have NIS, but obviously since Brexit, NIS 2 doesn't apply to us specifically, although, as I've talked about in physical security, good practice is good practice, and you'll find across all of these different types of compliances and directives and guidance and all the other good things. There's a lot of things that are similar about them for obvious reasons. Yeah, and again, the US may use the NIST own CSF. In terms of assurance, GovAssure is a scheme that's not quite there yet. That's something that's just coming along, and they're just working on that at the moment, which would be an assurance scheme, which is uses the CAF to give an assurance of a system. And again, looking at those, the bit in the bottom right there is looking at some of the security controls that are in 27001 might actually be a problem when using an OT system. So clear desk and clear screen, that is something that's and built into a lot of people and taught to a lot of people when it comes to their IT systems. But actually, that could make an unsafe condition for an OT system. So there may be there's some exclusions that are built into 62443 for that. Controls against malware. Well, a lot of the time, those types of products are incompatible with assets that you kind of guys deal with. So again, it may require testing on things like HMIs to make sure it's not going to cause issues. And also, we have to do things in slightly different ways in terms of monitoring traffic on, say, on firewalls and other types of devices. Information backup. Backups in IT can be run at times where the systems are quieter, and they can be run in such a way that they don't cause problems to users during the day. And of course, we said already, it's a 24/7 kind of thing that you guys are doing, and therefore being able to do backups and have them block up your systems and blocking safety messages might be a problem. So yeah, there's clearly contradictory things there that mean, actually, if we were to run directly to 27001, we wouldn't be able to actually do that in our OT environments. So looking at 62443, it's actually quite extensive. We're not going to clearly cover all of this in the next 10-15 minutes. Some of the main areas that we work in are part 3, which is the system, where we look at the design and we look at how we perform a risk assessment against that, and also then we look at defining those technical security requirements around those. So we create a security risk assessment, funnily enough, not too different to what we were doing in physical security, and we will have a risk register where we look at how we are mitigating against those risks, and then the risk register that looks at all the residual risk that remains, that we all are as happy as we ever could be. You know, we talked about risk before, again, in physical security. Some of the other areas of it, such as general really sets the scene in terms of looking at concepts and models, terminology, use cases, all those kind of things. So it helps us all start talking in the same way and establishes that kind of baseline. Policies and procedures really start to come from our high level and top level people in terms of our security, setting up a security program, understanding where we want to be in terms of security level, and things like that. And then part 4 tends to be more to do with looking at our suppliers and our product life cycles and our equipment life cycles and things like that. So yeah, in terms of our security levels, there are 4. I'm sure everybody will want to do the best in the bottom one, which is to protect against intentional violation using sophisticated means. It's certainly extremely extensive and requires a lot to do that. A lot of people might tend to work towards SL3 in this case. So yeah, we do get asked about certification as such. Any type of official certification is still in development, pretty much like the ECAF. And when it's finished, so again with the ISA and the IEC, they've got an IAC SSA, still in the development. Any other certification that anybody tells you about, that tends to be more based on being certified a set of specific systems designed to do a set of specific tasks. But within your sector and using energy, you use a collaboration of systems, don't you? You know, yes, you've got your SCADA, PLCs, but you've got a lot of other systems that you use alongside all those, such as your weather meteo systems, corrosion protection systems. There's lots of other things that kind of come together that you have a collaborate to make the entire kind of system that you're working with, or your wind farm or whatever it would be. Yeah, there is no specific certification that covers a whole system. So for the NCSE's CAF, we have 4 objectives, and under that 14 principles. And again, looking at some of these that are here, they don't deviate too much to what 62443 is. So as a business, we tend to work with the NCSE CAF here in the UK, but we of course align ourselves to 62443 because it makes sense and it allows us to prove and give assurance that we are covering that practice. As we said about the CAF, it can be used for IT and OT, and it uses sector-specific profiles, sector-specific outcomes that are available to them. And they also use documents called IGPs, indicators of good practice, and again, those are sector-specific. I suppose we consider Cyber Essentials to be a really straightforward bunch of those, really. And they ask very simple and straightforward questions in things like Cyber Essentials. Do you have a firewall? Do you have firewall rules that come from outside to inside? Do you have any PCs with Windows 10 on them? They ask very straightforward questions, so that even if people are not massively technically led or very cyber aware, they can answer those questions in a very simple way. And this system here has been taken in by a group of industry agencies and government agencies, such as the what is now the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. Been the government, that department changes name every couple of weeks, I think. The Energy Network Association, certainly the DNOs and people like that have all taken basically this guidance and put it into their own kind of cybersecurity connection guidance that they have. So yeah, I think it's fair to say that cybersecurity is complex and that compliance can be complex too. Obviously, we're all working towards the same goals, aren't we? In terms of making the UK safest place to live and work. And that We're looking at managing our risks, protecting against cyber attacks, detecting any of those cyber attacks and those events that come along. So monitoring is huge. Minimizing any impacts of any events. We'd be very naive to think we would never get them. But what we have to do is put into place whatever we need to minimize if there were any impact. And then very key, developing the right skills, knowledge and culture around it too. And we don't just mean that from the people who sit there and program equipment or do things like that. It's everybody in their day-to-day work and life using that physical security properly, making sure that we are adhering to our proper controls and methodologies and how we connect into the system and use it, to make sure that we're building on two things that the government really puts on a couple of pedestals: build your own cyber resilience and make sure we're defending as one country, really. So how do we help people? Well, for some of our customers, we provide full secure IACS networks, including the connectivity and the security between the systems that are on site and these different ones that we talked about. We look at basically providing secure access for your O&M and for your maintenance partners too, whoever that may be, whether that's people like us, whether that's maybe the people who say who look after your turbines if you do wind farms, whatever it would be, making sure they've got proper audited controlled access in. And as part of that, where do you start from? Looking at the business impact, helping you categorize and do your threat analysis. Security risk assessment, massive, and obviously things like the risk registers that sit alongside those, giving that value analysis and just making sure that the benefits are understood by your stakeholders, and risk mitigation plans as well. For some of our customers who are a little earlier in the journey, obviously helping them actually define what their cybersecurity policies. That's something that's come across to us quite a bit recently, is around people coming to us, whether that's stakeholders, employers, the people who are actually wanting to build these things and saying, actually, we're not sure what to ask of our suppliers and our contractors. So we need help in building those cybersecurity policies and helping to define what those employers' requirements look like for cybersecurity. So yeah, and that ensures that those asset owners and those stakeholders, they're ready to expect the best from their contractors and partners. So with that being said, quite a big whistle-stop tour. It'd be cool to get in more depth, but in the 30 minutes we've got, we haven't got a huge amount of time. Has anybody got any questions?
Okay, Mick. So we've got a couple that have come through.
Cool.
First up, do you do pen checks on your systems?
Oh, wow. Okay. What a question. Simple answer to that is yes. I'll widen it out slightly. We would never do a pen check or a penetration testing on our own systems ourselves, because obviously it's not great to mark your own homework, is it, as we call it. So we would normally use a third party to do that. Some of our customers actually do that themselves. Their own third party will do a penetration test and do cyber checks on the systems, produce a report, and our actual clients share that with us. And obviously if there's any mediations, we have to look at that. But we do that for other partners as well. So if there's other businesses, we will do them for them, in both in OT and IT, actually.
Great, thank you. Next one. Have you found with some of your existing customers that actual requirements from the site owners have not been clearly defined?
Yeah, I would say that certainly, a lot of employers' requirements will say 27,001, as we said, and we've already known now the reasons why that alone is not quite right. As you said, safety is not included, and the other thing is some contradictory kind of guidance as well. So we do see it a lot. Yes, I think what's encouraging is a lot of contractors and primary contractors, whoever they are, EPCs, have said, well, actually, we've recognized that too, and therefore we're actually going to ask of our suppliers and our people and our own business that we adhere to whatever it would be, the NCSC's CAF or 62443. So that's really good and encouraging. But yeah, employers' requirements still ask for 27,001 and maybe 9,001 too.
Great. Okay, and I've got one more. Someone here is they've just acquired a new site that already has an established OT system. So they're just wondering where you might recommend to start, just basically get started with cybersecurity requirements and looking into that.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, it can be a bit overwhelming, can't it, with a system you've inherited, because you don't know much about it, you don't know what's been done to it. And actually, there's another angle too, which we've recently had, whereby it's been basically a change in staff. So people have run this system, and then a new person has come to manage it, and they said, actually, my initial glances of the system have meant that I'm not massively happy with what's been done in the past. For example, having problems getting SCADA messaging through, so they just turn the firewall off on the router. That's a real thing that's happened, and obviously this person's looked and gone, oh, why have they done that? And therefore have come to us for help on things like that. So yeah, a lot of that is starting off with that initial assessment, isn't it? It's looking at all of your components, and you do unfortunately have to start with this in terms of looking at all the components, putting together our risk assessment and register against all those components, and then starting from there and creating a plan of how you're going to mitigate each of the risks you're coming across, because that's just one of them, you know. And we can start delving into a lot of detail there pretty quickly, but our only way to tackle it really is just to start with the assessment. There's no point, okay, let's check this firewall, let's try and fix stuff that's broken, let's find this thing, let's fix it. You really got to do a mass assessment of every component, everything, starting back from documentation too, isn't it? Getting back, you know, have we got the drawings, have we got the documentation, have we got those design kind of informational FDSs, whatever people call them, design specs, and taking it from there really. So yeah, assessing what's there and then making a plan.
Great. All right. Well, that's all the questions, Mick. So back to you.
Okay, cool. Fantastic. So yeah, thank you very much for everyone's time. Oh, we ran over by a minute. That's okay though, isn't it? So our next one will be in May. It'd be really good to speak to everybody again. And again, if you guys have got anything that you want me to talk on, go, oh, do you know, we'd really like information on this, or we'd really like to, you know, we really don't understand this thing, it'd be really cool if you could talk about it. Then yeah, give us a shout. Reach out to Craig or myself, or even to Dylan. Dylan's on holiday this week, by the way. He's decided to go off and get some sun, I think. But again, we'll be looking at whatever you want us to talk about. This is for you guys, so it's really important to me that we talk about things that are relevant to you, and what are impacting your days and your lives. So yeah, join us on this 22nd of May. Kara's going to be putting a web link up in the chat somewhere, so that should be on by now. And yeah, you can go on there and sign up. And yeah, thank you very much, and shall see you all next time.